Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank everybody for attending the presentation today, the demonstration of the 2012 Early Case Assessment DCIG Buyer's Guide. We're going to do an overview of the ECA market and then also do a demonstration of the Interactive Buyer's Guide, which I don't believe any of you have seen. A couple of housekeeping chores first, or announcements. First of all, if you want to ask a question, you can certainly do that by clicking on the question button, and I will keep an eye on that and try to bring up those questions either real time or maybe save them until the end, depending on what the question is, so we can get through those. There's a lot of people on the webinar today, so we may not be able to get to everybody's question. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. The agenda for today, we're going to go through a quick introduction, do a real quick overview of the early case assessment market, then talk a little bit about the guide methodology, how we develop the questions, how we develop the criteria for ranking, scoring, standard deviations for category assessment, and so on. We will then talk a little bit about the 2012 ECA Static Buyer's Guide, which is available to download online from several different sources. And then we'll do a demonstration of the Interactive Buyer's Guide. And then if we have time at the end, we'll go ahead and answer any questions that the audience may have. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. I recognize quite a few of the names on the list today, not everybody. So to those people that I know, good to see you again. To the people that I don't know, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Charles Scamser. I am the founder and senior analyst for eDiscovery Solutions Group, and also the lead analyst on the Interactive Buyer's Guide, the Early Case Assessment Interactive Buyer's Guide that we're going to be looking at. As a quick overview of my organization, we're an international thought leader and global provider of market intelligence, advisory services, and information management consulting, and we specialize in information governance, eDiscovery, and advanced cloud computing. So today's presentation of the Early Case Assessment Buyer's Guide is an example of the type of market intelligence and research that we provide to the marketplace. A little bit about our brand. We run a fairly prolific blog on a weekly basis called the eDiscovery Paradigm Shift, and then also manage and monitor 4 or 5 different groups, LinkedIn groups. We have a email contact list, which has been all by sign up of about 25,000 general counsel, CIOs, and vendor participants that we send out emails to quite regularly. So we have a fairly large footprint and brand within social media. And if anybody's interested in getting signed up for any of those, you can certainly go to the website at eDiscoverySolutionsGroup.com. Some of the accomplishments for 2012, in addition to the Early Case Assessment Buyer's Guide, we've also put out a study on how cloud service providers support eDiscovery, and just recently released a study of the 250 of the general counsel from the 250 Global 250 on how they view eDiscovery. We also run weekly polls, monthly seminars, and just recently I was the moderator at the 2012 Carmel Valley eDiscovery Retreat and ran the tracks on cloud computing and eDiscovery. The organization that actually sponsors and has put together this guide, as I said earlier, I was actually the lead analyst. It was put together by an organization called DCIG. DCIG is a very well-known boutique analyst firm in information technology, storage, and enterprise content management. They have a very, very successful 5-year track record of Static Buyer's Guide, and I've listed a real small example of some of the things that they've done. 2011 virtual server backup software, 2011 mid-range deduplication appliance, big data, and tape library for 2012, mid-range array snapshot software for 2011, and on. I think they've done 20 or 30 different buyer's guides. And what's interesting about what they do is they actually established the practice of objective ranking, which means that instead of going in and lumping all of the vendors together, the products together in particular categories. They actually, in every single one of their buyer's guides, go through, very similar to what you'd see from Consumer Reports, as they go through and actually rank objectively the vendors from 1 to X, which then gives users and vendors, quite honestly, an idea of where they rank and so on. And then they publish the criteria that they use to go do that. It's all objective. I'll talk about that a little bit more. Now, just this last year, what's very exciting and what we're going to be showing you today is they've also developed the interactive buyer's guide platform, which allows you to interactively log online and be able to manipulate and analyze all of the data that's collected for a particular guide. And so the interactive buyer's guide is now up and running for the early case assessment study, and it's also up and running for 3 or 4 others that I'll point out when we take a look at the guide. So all that's very exciting and kind of a new approach for both users and vendors to be able to analyze data within their industry. A little bit about the eDiscovery market. I think that probably everybody on the call today is up to date on the current statistics, but this actually just came out a few days ago. But it's a new research organization called Transparency Market Research, and it's a little higher than what we've seen in some other research information, but they're contending that the global eDiscovery market was worth about $3.6 billion in 2010 and is expected to reach $9.9 billion in 2017 with an annual growth rate of about 15.4%, which is pretty remarkable. For those of you in the industry like I am, it's not overly remarkable because I live and breathe this on a daily basis, and I understand why it's growing at that rate. In fact, I probably, if I had to guess, think that it's probably growing faster. Now, some of the key factors that are driving this growth, according to Transparency Market Research, are increasing adoption of predictive coding, which, by the way, we're going to be coming out with a buyer's guide for predictive coding sometime in the next 6 months. Growing risk mitigation activities within organizations, increase in criminal prosecutions and civil litigation, and the growth of records management across various industries. So I'm not going to belabor the fact. I think we all know that this is an extremely large industry, and hence the interest in trying to figure out which tools that we should all be using to be able to analyze the data and make sure that we're providing counsel with the best evidence that we can coming out of electronic information. Let me talk a little bit about the guide methodology. Now, anybody can download this. I know that Guidance Software has it on their site. I believe that DCIG has it also. If you don't have a copy of it, you can certainly contact me afterwards. But I talk about this in great detail in the static guide. But just to give you kind of a highlight of what we do or what we did, we interviewed a lot of vendors. I'm not going to say that we interviewed every vendor. We chose some at random, so to speak, at various stages in their growth and life cycle of their products. So we got a pretty good representation. We asked them about their products, what they thought was important, and so on. We also interviewed users, both current users of various products and also prospective users that were thinking about buying early case assessment tools, and so they had a set of criteria that they were looking at, or a set of things that they were thinking about that maybe were important. Then we also talked to consultants that were out working with the tools, and I would add to that we also talked to a lot of the players within law firms and litigation service providers that were using these tools. So we got a pretty good idea of what early case assessment was, what the user base was expecting, and where it was going in general. So from that, we developed a list of over 300 criteria, and luckily we have an online system to do this with because of all the great work from DCIG. So this wasn't done with spreadsheets per se. And then we ranked the value of each criteria. Now, I'm going to say that the guide is objective. This is probably the one place where it maybe was a little bit subjective. The other analysts that worked on this from DCIG and I sat down and discussed each one of those 300 criteria and gave each one of them a value. And so there was some subjective, but a lot of that was based on the input that we got from the interview process. And so it wasn't all based on just our feeling. It was based on the things that the vendors, users, consultants, and so on said were important. From that, we also then developed a standard deviation model for categories. We had recommended, excellent, good, and so on. And we based all of that on a standard deviation from the highest scores. And then from that, obviously 300 questions is a lot, so we actually broke that down into a list of 100 survey questions and provided that survey online to 40-plus vendors. I actually think we started with almost 60 vendors, but we seriously dealt with about 40 vendors. Of those, we got responses back from 25 vendors that included 29 ECA products. Now, there's been a couple of questions and comments in regards to who was included and who was not included. You know, we tried to send it to everybody that we could, everybody that we were aware of. We did not get responses back from some that we thought we would. And it was also sent to some vendors that many would say are not ECA vendors, but I think that what we believe, again, based on the interview, is that there's a tremendous amount of overlap and evolution going on. So there may be some review vendors that are involved in this survey that you know, we believe are starting to move into the early case assessment arena, and so they were also included. You know, once we got the scores back, we then went through a vetting process, and some of you, if you were involved, if there's any vendors on the call, I don't see. I guess there's a couple here on the list. You know, that was quite an interesting process. We talked to clients, we talked to users, we went back and forth with the vendors, and ended up scoring all of the answers. Once we got that done, obviously we then went in and wrote up the analysis, and then the report and so on was ready to go. So a little bit more about the methodology. Again, the details of all of this are actually in the written version that you can download. It's almost 90 pages long. The biggest difference, I think, between what we do and what some other analysts do is that we are objective versus a subjective ranking. We didn't take into account installed base. In fact, we didn't even look to see what the installed base was. We also did not take into consideration revenue. And we also, although we talked to a lot of customers, we did not consider their opinions. So if they said, gee, you know, this particular vendor's technology is just okay, but wow, their customer service is absolutely fantastic, and we really like the sales guys, we didn't take that into consideration. And of course, on the flip side, if somebody said, if one of the customers said, boy, this technology is fantastic, but wow, their customer service is horrible, and we don't like the sales guys, we didn't take that into consideration either. It was kind of, I call it kind of a Friday approach. For anybody that watched Dragnet, we just wanted the facts, and that's what we based our rankings on. The vendors also did not pay to play in this. It did not cost them anything. We didn't take into consideration other analyst work we might have been doing for some of them, and those types of things. None of that had any bearing on our rankings. And we actually, as I said, we actually ranked all the vendors from 1 to 29, which of course is a is the methodology developed by DCIG, and that's what they do with all of their industry buyer's guides. One of the things to take into consideration, because there has been a tremendous amount of feedback from a lot of different sources in regards to, gee, why is this particular vendor ranked number 5 and this one ranked number 12, when in fact I believe the one that's ranked number 12 is better than this one. I mean, everybody has an opinion on this, but I think what you're going to see when you start looking at the details is that over 300 questions, in a lot of cases, there was only a few points of difference between vendors that were, say, 5 to 10 spots apart. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that for an individual end user that the vendor that's ranked 5 or 10 spots higher is a better vendor. It just means that based on the criteria that I came up with that included 300 data points, they scored higher. And in some cases, like I'm saying here, it could be that they supported 5 more connectors than the other vendor, or they, did something from a user interface standpoint, or they supported 1 or 2 more operating environments that the other vendor didn't, and so that's why they scored higher. And you'll see that when you're using this guide, you need to take into consideration that you know, it allows you the opportunity to go in and actually say these are the 30 things or the 50 things that are important to me as a user, and therefore I want to see just those things. And I'll show you that with the interactive buyer's guides, that you know, you can take the rankings as they exist, and I think they're accurate in regards to, you know, who the best vendors are, but it's also based on you know, what we came up with. You have the ability with the interactive buyer's guide to go in and change those and come up with your own list of rankings. Now, the other thing, too, you need to keep in mind is that there was a cutoff date, and it was actually quite a few months ago because it took us a while to put this together, and therefore there's probably vendors out there that are doing things now that are not listed in this particular guide, but it will be updated quarterly. In fact, we're going to be going into a cycle in this coming week with the vendors so that they can update the interactive buyer's guide, so that will show up online almost instantaneously. And so the buyer's guide will be up to date, I'm going to say, within a 2 to 3 month window of what the guides, of what the vendors are doing. A couple of things now, I'm just real quickly, and I don't know if anybody's on the phone that was actually in the attended the Carmel Valley eDiscovery retreat out in Monterey a couple weeks ago, but this is part of the presentation I did there. I was a moderator for the cloud computing. I just thought I'd use this because it gives you an idea what my perspective is in regards to how this market is changing. You know, obviously, early case assessment and quite honestly, IT, you know, started out behind the firewall. And I'm going to include, you know, when I say behind the firewall, I'm talking about, you know, the legacy way of doing things. So that included, you know, mobile devices as they existed, you know, up until just a couple of years ago, which was, you know, laptop computers, maybe some, you know, computers outside the actual firewall, but they were included in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, we've migrated now to private clouds, which of course could be literally a private cloud managed by the organization, or it could be a private cloud managed by a cloud service provider, which, you know, could be somebody like an Amazon or a Rackspace or a, you know, a Blue Lock or somebody like that, which of course then extends where your data is. We can then move into you know, as we found from the Carmel Valley eDiscovery retreat discussions, a pretty scary area, and that is public cloud. And then that opens up, you know, data that's being stored out in things like Dropbox and you know, the social media places if you're having to collect data from, say, Facebook or something like that. I mean, the public cloud offers a whole other set of challenges for early case assessment. Obviously, what we're probably mostly going to be dealing with is some combination of all of the above, which is, you know, your hybrid cloud, which is going to be a combination of, you know, private, public, and behind the firewall with lots of different locations and so on. And, of course, the one thing that we always forget is that if we've got relationships with litigation service providers, that more than likely, if it's been going on for any amount of time, that there's also a tremendous amount of data sitting in their cloud or sitting behind their firewall, too, which may, you know, be pertinent across multiple different cases and so on. So that's something that sometimes we forget. We may be working on a new case with a new set of custodians, but some of the data for them may actually be resident with the litigation providers from a previous case. So when you look at early case assessments and as they're evolving, obviously historically doing them with a litigation service provider or a third-party law firm is pretty straightforward. That's been done for a long time. We're now starting to see some of that move back into behind the firewall within the corporation. We're starting to see, you know, organizations that can actually go and sit in a private cloud. You know, some of the litigation service providers and the vendors obviously are providing that capability to go be able to do early case assessment within the private cloud. There are a few that are now running in public cloud. I think for anybody that reads my blogs, you've been hearing about X1 Discovery. I know that NextPoint does that, and I'm sure I'm going to leave somebody out, but there are 2 or 3 others. In fact, I'm looking at another technology that wasn't included that is also doing that. I think that is the direction that we're going to start seeing early case assessment move. The fundamentals of the return on investment and the operational flexibility and so on of using some combination of public and private clouds, which I guess we would call the hybrid cloud, is where early case assessment is going to go. So I'm not going to say any more about this, except that this will give you an idea of where my head is in regards to where I think the industry is going. It's certainly not unique, but it does paint a picture that's much different than the way early case assessment was done, even say 2 or 3 years ago, where most things were behind the firewall and you worked with a litigation service provider or maybe your law firm. So let's talk now about, based on all of the input that we got, what are the criteria that we used for ranking? And, I'll have to say that I came in with some amount of bias because of my background in enterprise class information technology, applications development and big data analysis and so on, quite honestly, outside of the legal arena. And so, things that were important to me, are beginning to be important in litigation, in the legal arena. And I'm seeing that those are the things that, if they're supported by a vendor, are going to allow that vendor to be considered, kind of leading edge and very disruptive. So we're going to start talking, seeing things like data mapping, obviously, which are important. If you've been on the IT side of things, data mapping is nothing new, but it's relatively a unique and new idea. Obviously, from a legal hold standpoint and a data retention standpoint and all those types of things, having a good data map and so on is almost essential. But it's it's something that we've only seen these tools be able to support, say over the last couple of years. The next category was analysis of enterprise ESI before collections. It wasn't that many years ago where we kind of took everything we thought we might need, dumped it into an early case assessment tool, and started culling it down and so on. That was kind of the best practices. Now we want to be able to go analyze data where it sits, so to speak, and we want to be able to do that real time with the next criteria, and we also want to be able to integrate with enterprise archiving systems. We also want to be able to process social media, and quite honestly, we want to be able to do a lot of these things without disrupting the data where it resides. And so we want to be able to go in and say, you know what, we've got this big case coming up. Let's go do some analysis on how much data is actually out there, what it looks like, what we should be collecting, and so on. We want to do all of that in place, and we don't want to disrupt it. Once obviously we determine what we want to do and how we want to proceed, we then go through a collection process and bring it into our tool. Obviously, legal hold, and I don't mean just legal hold in general, but I mean automated and integrated legal hold, which goes back to the data mapping piece. And in a lot of cases, is part of the integration with enterprise archiving systems. So legal hold is becoming more sophisticated and required. Also, again, maybe pushed a little bit by my bias from coming from outside the industry, but I believe that workflow management and project management are extremely important. Quite honestly, early case assessment is a business process, and we should afford ourselves the ability to have workflow management and project management as part of that. It gives us the data points. It gives us the information we need. It helps us to move our data along, and it quite honestly helps us to manage that entire process in a much better way than it's been done in the past. Obviously, and I'm going to throw a bunch of things together here under next generation search. I probably would also throw things like predictive coding and so on. I'm going to say all the things beyond Boolean search capability. So clustering and the conceptual search, and there's a lot of really exciting things going on in this industry, and I'm almost seeing a paradigm shift in regards to to what we're going to see, and consequently what we expect from our early case assessment vendors. It needs to be next generation search. There are places where Boolean works, keywords work, but in most cases, to really do a thorough analysis with all of the data that we're dealing with, you're going to want to move on to next generation. I also see, as I said earlier, first pass review becoming broader. In some cases, we're seeing early case assessment tools that have the equivalent of a pretty sophisticated, a review tool wrapped up in the early case assessment as first pass review. And I think you're going to see a convergence of those two technologies. And I'm not going to talk a lot about it now about where I think the industry is going, but I'm going to say that there is going to be some convergence, and I think we're going to go to a more of an iterative, cyclical, I'm going to say an agile development process, or an agile process for ECA, where you're going to see data move in and out of these tools between review and analysis and collection and so on in a circular manner, and not so much a waterfall manner is kind of what we're doing now. I also believe that next generation user interfaces played an important role in how I did the rankings. There are some tools out there that haven't changed their user interface for quite a few years, and there are some that just came out with new ones, and there's a lot of really exciting things that can be done now with a small footprint On the client side, with Java apps and all of the internet server technology and so on. I also believe that information dashboards are extremely important, and so those tools that have those, they got ranked a little bit higher. Obviously, from what you've been hearing me say, and if you read my blogs and so on, obviously the ability to have a SaaS delivery option is extremely important, and there's also a wide range of what that means. It could mean that you host the data and allow access to it via the internet, or it could be that you actually have an application, an early case assessment application running actually in the cloud somewhere. And so SaaS delivery options does cover a wide variety of different things. So based on all of that, here are the 2012 early case assessment rankings as we saw them. Now you'll see the scores over on the right side here. So Guidance Software with their in-case eDiscovery came out with almost 80 points. Xterra Fusion was right behind them. So there again, there's five points. Now these scores were calculated and so on. So the points there actually were a little bit closer. Zylab ranked right behind them. And then in the excellent category, you've got Orcatech and Digital War Room and Autonomy, Semantics, Sword IQ, NextPoint, Nuix, and so on. And you'll find if you go in, and we're gonna see this in a few minutes. I mean, let's go down to, as an example, Orange Legal Technologies won at 47.6. There are categories where they moved up into the top 3, and also there's been some enhancements to that particular technology. Same with equivalent data needle finder and so on. So it could be that when we update the user's guide, that some of those technologies are going to move up. I also know that, as an example, Access Data has integrated some of their technologies, and so they become more powerful platforms in and of themselves. And so these scores are going to change, and so that's kind of the value of the interactive buyer's guide as users, to be able to go in and see, at least within, let's say, 30 to 60 days, what the current capabilities are of these individual tools. So I'm looking to see here. Looks like I've got a couple of questions. I'm gonna go ahead and hold on those for a second. Let me go through kind of the purpose of the guide, and I think that it might be obvious. It may not be, but for vendors, provides them with an ability to do competitive analysis. It's interesting having, I say that I'm not in the industry, but I've actually been in and around this industry, pretty deep for probably about 10 years now, and very aggressively for the last 5 years. But one of the things I found is that, like with any other industry, there's a lot of myth out there about who does what and what they do and what they don't do, and it's almost considered proprietary. And in some cases maybe it should be, but this particular tool, this interactive buyer's guide, is going to allow vendors to see exactly what their competitors do and what they don't do. And I'm also going to say that part of the vetting process that we're going to go through in August now and then every quarter is that we're also going to allow vendors to, I'm going to say, submit a request to have particular capabilities checked once again. They may say, gee, I don't think this vendor over here does this. And so we're going to go through that process too, and we welcome that because that will allow us to have an even more accurate report. The vendors can also use this to assist with product roadmaps, so they can go in and say, gee, we don't do these 5 things or these 10 things. Maybe they should be on our product roadmap, or they can check to see if those things are on the product roadmap, and if they're not, put them on there. So it should be a tool that the product management team should be able to use to understand. Obviously, from a sales and marketing standpoint, it should be almost invaluable during the sales cycle, during positioning, and all the things on the marketing side. But absolutely during the sales cycle, for salespeople within the vendor community to have access to this data, to be able to go through competitive analysis and be able to do side-by-side comparisons and so on with the other vendors that they know that they're competing with. And in some cases, maybe even help the end user walk through the process. And we all know that the vendors want to win, so they'll be able to use this tool. Each of the vendors will be able to use this tool to be able to go in and make their tool shine by generating custom reports and so on that show that they do everything that the particular user needs to be able to do. From a user standpoint, and I'm not going to say that it was necessarily developed for users. But quite honestly, I think the value to the users is outstanding. It provides them with independent analysis, so it's not something that they had to do internally. Quite honestly, this was a multi-month process, lots and lots of hours, and I'm not going to say that it's something that if I was an end user that I'd want to have to go through, because it's very difficult to get all of this information. So here's a way for them to get access to independent analysis. We've also pre-done a list of criteria for an RFP, and it could be that any individual user doesn't want to use all 300 criteria, but they're there for them to pick and choose the ones that make sense for them. And quite honestly, they can also use this tool to be able then to go in and actually generate a short list of those vendors that they want to go take a look at. And we've already showed it to quite a few different users and so on, and it's been interesting because they start to say, gee, you can really go in and at a very granular level start to understand the subtle nuances between these vendors. And and I apologize if there's any vendors on the phone, but the users think, and not have to rely on the vendors and what they're saying in regards to whether they do something or don't, or how important it is. This provides users kind of an independent way of going in and fact-checking to see, if what the vendors have been saying is accurate. And so, quite honestly, bottom line, it's going to dramatically reduce the cost and time to purchase for users, and that's extremely valuable. I mean, in some cases, we're probably talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars that can be saved by a user by using this tool to get through a process and get a system up and running where one didn't exist before. So, the value of the guide, obviously, independent data and ranking. It's going to allow you to compare vendors on common criteria within the Interactive Buyer's Guide. It's going to allow you to identify vendors that meet specific requirements. It's going to allow you to develop and print custom product comparisons, not only for specific vendors or for specific criteria, but also with specific vendors and specific criteria. So that's valuable to both vendors and to end users, obviously, where they can go in and they can say, for these 5 vendors and these specific criteria, which vendors are the highest ranked. Or you could just go in and say, these 25 criteria are the most important to me, and therefore, I want to see which vendors do that the best. So we've got a couple of questions. The first one is, are there going to be additional vendors included in the next go-around? We're discussing that. I believe, obviously we're not going to generate a new static guide until next year, but we are going to allow vendors in every quarter. So there'll be a window of opportunity here within the August-September timeframe that will allow new vendors in as we go through and allow all the vendors that participated to update their answers. Next question was, are we going to allow additional questions? We're debating that because that does dramatically change the overall complexion of the rankings, and much more so than whether a vendor said no, they couldn't do that before, and now they say yes. That's pretty straightforward. But once we get into actually changing the question, so I'm going to say that's up in the air. We're looking at that from a technical standpoint. The easy answer is we definitely will have a new set of criteria and questions for the 2013 guide, and we will solicit input from a wider range of vendors and so on. I'm assuming that all of the vendors that participated are going to have some input in regards to what criteria are important, and all the users that license the Interactive Buyer's Guide, I'm sure, are going to be a valuable source of what additional questions we should be answering. We should be asking. One last question: is there going to be a guide for document review? We're also looking at that. At one point we wanted to quickly do one for predictive coding or computer-aided eDiscovery. I think now we're going to do a combination of document review and predictive coding sometime later this year, possibly not till early next year, and we'll keep you up to date on what that is. So with that, I'm going to go in and do a demonstration. You'll have to bear with me a second here. I need to actually switch over to a different system. So hopefully everybody can see this. This is what the DCIG Interactive Buyer's Guide looks like. And so you can see that we've got an overall score. And so that shows across the top. So we've got guidance software, you know, and if we go in here, I have to actually go in and double click on this because it will come back with a different list. Oh, we lost our connection. So I need to go ahead and start this up again. I apologize. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put my user ID in. Okay, so if you now go look at as I said earlier, once you log in, you're going to have access. Right now, we've got the 2012 mid-range array, the enterprise scale out, and so on. And so if you want to look at the early case assessment, you come down here. And now you'll see with the overall score that you've got the scoring as shown in the static guide. So we've got guidance and Xtero and Xylab and Architect and so on, you know, coming down. And then we've got the different categories. So we've got search, we've got management, we've got operating environment, we've got user experience, and the last one down here is support. So if we're interested in, say, you know, just a cursory look and a quick look at who, you know, which vendor ranked the highest in search, we can come in here and double click on that, and it will show us that now the list is Autonomy and Xtero, guidance, and then Crow moves up and so on. If we're interested in management, we can do the same thing here, and it will come in and show us that from a management standpoint, Xylab and Architect rank the highest. From an operating perspective, guidance software. Now here's an interesting one. From a user experience, guidance did rank #1, but this is an example now where an organization such as Orange Legal Tech, with their one, moved way up the list, and so, you know, Semantic moved up further and so on. So you can see with each one of these categories that you know, it's going to change the ranking. Now, if you want to start looking at just exactly what each one of these companies do, you could go in as an example and you could double click on the equivalent data from Needlefinder, and it's going to go in and it's going to show you what their score was and so on, and you can look at it online. But if you wanted to at that point, then you have the ability to go and actually print this out. So you can come out now and you can go print this in a really nice PDF format for a presentation. If you wanted to present this to a client, or if you were a client or an end user and you wanted to present it to a buyer's committee and so on, it's going to go through and it's going to show you for equivalent data all the different data points within each one of the categories. Now, more than likely, what you're going to want to do is maybe you're going to want to go in and say, I want to compare equivalent data with, say, Autonomy, and it's going to allow you then to go do that in a side-by-side comparison. And so what that will show you then, again, you can look at it online, and it's going to show you the scores side by side. We actually come in and provide you with a chart here that shows how they did based on the best-in-class, recommended, excellent, good, and basic. And again, you can go print this out. So you may want to go in and click on the print button, and it's going to come back, and it's going to show you all of this information. But this time, it's going to show you the comparisons between, in this case, Autonomy and equivalent data. So you can see that there's a tremendous amount of very granular data that will allow you to go in and compare what's important to you. Now, if you actually want to go in and say, you know what, I don't want to see everything. What I really want to see is I want to go in and I want to build a brief. And so what that allows you to do is that allows you to go in and actually say, these are the particular things, these are the particular features that are important to me. So you may want to go in and say, you know what I'm really interested in is operating environment. So let's go in and let's just say, you know, from an operating environment standpoint, I'm interested in on-premise software, let's just say SaaS via third-party data center. So you can click on that. Now in this case, it's going to show you everybody, all of the vendors that actually came back with that. Now that's too big to print. So what you could do then is you could go in and you can say, you know what, the vendors that I'm interested in are Digital Reef, and let's go pick another one here. Let's go say, you know, equivalent data. And we can then go in and say Quivio Zoom. And it'll take a second here for that to move up. So now we've got those three, and you can see as an example from a SaaS via third-party data center that Quivio Zoom was the only one that did that. You know, we want to say, let's add now that we want to look at those vendors that do Lucene for search, and we'll see that Digital Reef is the only one that uses that. We could then go in and say, you know what, let's go into search, and let's go in and say under search criteria that we want to know which ones do a phonic search. So now we're going to add that particular capability. And so now it's done search ranking and so on. So you can see that you can actually go through and you can create a very, very granular report of those features that are important to you. Now, once you get this done, now I'm not going to go through and show you, you know, all the different features and capabilities, because I think you get a pretty good idea of what it's going to do. But once you're done with this, you can then go in and print this out. And again, from two different perspectives. From a vendor perspective, if you know, you're a salesperson and you have a client that is looking at, let's just say these particular three vendors, you could go through and say, you know what, the things, the 15, 20, 30, all the way up to 300 criteria that you should be looking at are right here, and you can see that we're the vendor that actually does the best job. And you can go in and obviously choose the ones that you're going to do better than others. You know, just as important from an end user standpoint, you can go in and say, you know what, I've got 4 or 5 vendors that I think, you know, seem to fit the criteria for what I'm looking for. Let's go in and really look at those features that are important to us and see how they stack up against each other. Now, you know, starting to move towards kind of summarizing the value of what this is, I don't think this is a tool for an end user to go in and actually choose the individual vendor that they're going to go purchase. They definitely could do that. There's no doubt about it. But what would be more, you know, advisable, or what I would recommend, is that they can go use this tool to be able to go and actually take a look at, you know, the features that are important to them. And I mean, obviously, I've just shown, you know, I've shown 3 different things here. You could, like I said, you could go in and put 40, 50, 60 different criteria and see which vendors actually rank the highest and which vendors can do that. And that's going to allow you to go create a short list to bring in and actually, you know, start looking at, you know, which one makes the most sense. And, you know, for your particular organization, and quite honestly, that's when you can get into subjective, you know, types of criteria. It may be important how much revenue they generated. It may be important how many installed systems they have. You know, what their clients think of them may be important to you. Those are the types of things that your purchasing committee then can start doing. But having this tool in place will allow you to dramatically reduce the amount of time that it's going to take to get to that point. And it's going to provide you with an unbiased third-party source of information that's going to allow you to make some of those decisions. So with that, let's go back to go back to our presentation here, and you can take a look at the last set of questions and answers. If anybody has any, can go ahead and submit them now. There's a question about, okay. There was a question in regards to, how many vendors can you show across the top? And I have to apologize. I think it's about 10. Obviously, in a landscape environment, I think you can show about 10 different vendors across the top. Obviously, as you can see from, if you go in and say, let me see all the vendors that do a particular feature, it shows all 29, and you can't fit that for a print. So to be able to print, I believe it's about 10 different vendors that you can compare side by side. Next question was how many features or criteria. If you wanted to, you could do all 300, and it would show you the vendors that you chose in those 300 different criteria. Okay, a couple of other questions. I'll take two more, and then I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up here. The last question was, we do provide consulting on both sides. So as a vendor, if you're interested, we will come in and sit down and show you how to use this tool, or work with you in regards to how to use this tool. Same thing on the user side. We can do a couple of different things there. We can come in and actually help you through an RFP process using this tool, and we can also train your sales organizations and your marketing people in regards to using this tool, which of course would be on the vendor side. So, any other questions? I would like to thank everybody for attending today, and anybody that's seriously interested in licensing this for the next 7 days. So actually 8 days until a week from tomorrow, Friday. If you contact me, we have a 10% discount for anybody that wants to purchase within that particular window. Standard retail price is $5,000 for an annual license per seat. We do have volume discounts, but from now until a week from tomorrow, it's $4,500 on an annual license. So thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I hope everybody has a good day. Thank you.